Okay. All right. Let me go to the YouTube.
I have not watched those movies in a long time.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. Content. Live. Manage.
There. Stop sitting on
Yes.
that lip. There.
Okay.
No more sitting on quartz.
Okay. We are live on YouTube as well.
Sweet. Oh, it says it started 2 minutes ago. Okay.
Yeah, because there's a little lag because it didn't appear on the actual thing until probably about 10 seconds ago.
Fair enough. We'll have to or I assume you'll add in an intro thing at some point when you edit it for like final
Oh yeah.
YouTube and
Oh
stuff.
yeah. Oh no,
I mean,
absolutely.
we have we have Peter in the Netherlands, and he's all up there with his layup, and he sets in we're going live, and he puts the intro music in, but then he's good at what he does. He's also a silly man. I love him, but I tease him a lot. I have to. He has 2 girlfriends and lives in the Netherlands, so
Oh wow. Oh wow.
no,
Do they
like
know about each other? Because
yes,
because
the
we're
3
because
of
we're
them are
live.
the 3 of them are together. They are
Oh.
all together. They are a
Oh, so
happy
it's like
throuple.
polyamory. Okay.
Yes, they are a happy throuple.
Nothing wrong with that.
No,
Okay.
he's actually the only one I know who's pulled off that. There's been lots of horror stories, but anyway, you're right. We should be starting with our
Okay.
official whenever you're ready.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you everyone. I see uh there's like a few people watching. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This is the Heretical Whispers podcast, and I'm here with Lilith Liberated. This will be the first podcast on YouTube. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited that Lilith agreed to speak with me today. Um, Thank you, Lilith. Thank you for coming on.
I'm delighted to talk with you at any time. I've been a big fan of your work as much as I've seen thus far. I'm sure I have plenty of catching up to do. But it is just so wonderful to exchange ideas and conversations with really intelligent, articulate people. And I mean, you've read You've read more Ingersoll than I have. I'm kind of jealous.
And that was in, oh wow, that was in the late 90s. So you know how far back that was? Like that was in the late
Oh my
90s
God.
when I found out about Ingersoll.
And that was the
Yeah.
Gutenberg Library you told me, which is the only way to get a lot of his
Yes.
stuff because it's out of print.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I listen to some of the stuff on LibriVox because that can also be a way to access an audiobook version of it. Although, I mean, don't get me wrong, if I could get like leather bound, oh, I would just absolutely. But we got to do what we got to do, and there's more than one way to lose knowledge. So we have to do the work and make sure that doesn't happen.
No, absolutely. 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 So everyone, I just want to give a brief condensed bio from of Lilith so you can know who she is and what she's about. She has a lot of layers to her, but this is just one of them, right? So Lilith Thompson is an ex-evangelical and atheist advocate, writer, and artist. Initially a devoted believer who studied Christian leadership at seminary, and her quest for truth eventually led to a radical change in view. In articles for the secular world, she attempted to balance compassion for victims of ideological coercion with an uncompromising insistence on the truth. Now, she uses knowledge from years of both indoctrination and research to contribute to the Blasphemers Bible Study panel with Aaron Raw every week. So you guys definitely have to check that out. And this is the best of both worlds, right? Because I know some people that they grew up in a secular household, great for them. However,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to conversation and when it comes to education, they only have one lens because they grew up secular. They don't know about religion other than from an academic perspective. Um, but little, and as myself, we actually lived it, we
Mm-hmm.
were in it, and we know both sides. And so it kind of gives us double fuel
Mm-hmm.
to talk about matters. So that's important that Lilith comes from both sides of the street. So this will be a very interesting and provocative conversation. And so, as again, it is always customary that we start off with a toast, and Lilith will start it, and she's going to basically say what she wants listeners to get out of our conversation. So, Lilith, if you start us off. Oh,
This
before that, tell us what you're drinking.
Oh, yes, yes. I forgot to tell you, as a proud Canadian and loyal British Columbian resident, I am drinking the Big Bang Theory from Blasted Church Winery, which is an actual winery and an actual wine in British Columbia. There's a hilarious story about having to move a church and loosen the old nails from like 100 years ago by literally shocking the building with dynamite and then disassembling it and moving it. It's amazing.
Whoa, whoa, we're
I
gonna have to
know.
get into that later. Oh, wow,
That's
wow.
just some fun history. It's on their website. They could give you the whole shakedown on that. It's hilarious, but it's it. I think I drank it when I interviewed uh an expert in evolution, Dr. Oh God, I'm blanking completely. I'm having one of those moments. We were discussing Kent Hovind and his discussion on evolution. I'm like, and I'm drinking the Big Bang Theory because he doesn't know the difference. PZ Myers. I actually had the opportunity to interview him twice. Thanks
Oh,
to
wow. Very
thanks
cool.
to believing herding cats, one of the two shows we run on the channel. Peter Gonna Go For It runs when he's not doing all the background work for Aaron Raw, which he obviously does a lot of that too, because Aaron is always putting out stuff and it's so exciting. But as for this conversation, bring it back. I hope that people get the chance to reconsider the different ways people think, that they get the chance to expand their perspective a little bit and to find their courage. Because I can tell you that as much as the facts led me to where I am right now, that would never be enough without the courage to dismantle beliefs I was taught to fear questioning from my earliest days. And people who don't want you to think are not your friends. So find your courage, ask questions, and listen to the answers. And science bless.
Salute, question everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Cheers. Mm.
And for myself, I'm just sipping on some smooth apple Crown Royal.
Yes.
You know, something a
Appreciate
little
that.
smooth.
Hey, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Canadians.
And oh yeah. And for everyone that is just joining in, the title of our conversation is Breaking Belief: How Neurodivergency Shaped One Woman's Path to Atheism. This is very, very interesting. And me and Lila kind of talked offline about neurodivergency and how it it permeates the atheist landscape and how it allowed her to encompass that. Fascinating conversation. So, well, Lilith, if you're ready,
Let's get
let's dig
into it.
on in. Oh yeah, let's dig on
Absolutely.
in. Okay. So let's see.
So,
Okay. Now, can you walk us through your journey from being a Christian to identifying as an atheist? And what were the pivotal moments or realizations that led to your deconversion?
that is a complex question. And while I've answered it several times, I never give the same answer twice. And I'm not lying at any point because there's so much to it. Because I believed, like I really believed. And when we bring up neurodivergence, I have always known that my brain did not work like other people's. Sometimes you come off as a genius, sometimes you come off as an idiot. But I'm not seeing the same spectrum as everyone else. I'm seeing part of the same. It's like if I couldn't see red, but I could see ultraviolet. Like I'm just, yeah. So, yeah, genius or idiot, back and forth, depending on your context. And in Christianity, I was given rules that I could follow. The rigid, this is how it is, this is the nature of things. This idea that all of these authoritative structures were somehow inherent to the universe is something I didn't actually like, but I appreciated the stability of having that idea. Because especially when I'm in a situation where I'm not on my strong end of the spectrum and I don't know what to do, and they're like, oh, here are the rules. You do the rule. Okay, I do the rules. When it comes to what broke me out of it, the best thing and a really key point for me in my deconversion was a series by Evidence from years ago, decades ago, called Why I Am No Longer a Christian. Now, he's not the first or the only person to write a treatise on why they are not or are no longer a Christian. But he described the belief in God as a meta belief. It's not a single point where you have a single thing and that's the belief and what it stands on. And like the little, the Superman toy, you'd hold him up by his chin and he'd be flying out the end. There's not just one point. It's a whole network of points, and dismantling those points is the work of years. And much of it is done within the context of belief. Because my understanding as, a younger person was very literal minded. They said, this is the way it is. I believed it literally. I was also explicitly told to believe it literally, but that's a separate situation. And taking that apart, for many years, I regarded that as spiritual growth, as myself maturing in the faith, coming to a fuller, more adult understanding. And I kept picking because I am never satisfied with a partial answer. And I kept picking and I kept picking and I kept picking. And over the course of that time, I had memorized so much Bible trivia when I was in that biblical leadership course that I
Hmm.
told you about during one of the classes. I was answering so many of the questions that when they set up the, you know, historically accurate reenactment of the Last Supper, they made me as the servant who would kneel in the middle to try and get me to stop talking. But I don't care about power structure hierarchies. I don't even see them. They're of no importance to me. So I just kept answering.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. That
Yeah.
kind of happened to me. I got thrown out of more Bible classes for kids than I can remember because the I would ask the hard questions. You know.
And I admire that. I had that suppressed in myself quite a bit. And I recognize, you know, that it was deliberate and it was systematic. There were still moments where that rebellious spirit that I so love about myself came forward, and I'm particularly told of one time when I was like 6 or something.
Hmm.
The Sunday school teacher was teaching us about Moses, and she was really boring. So I said, "Hey guys, I'm Moses. I'm going to lead you to freedom." And I just stood up and walked out the door, and they all followed me.
Wow. And so what was the fallout after that? Because I know there was a fallout. There had to be.
You know, it wasn't that bad. I think my mom was just like, "You can't do that," you know. It wasn't that bad because I was, bless my heart, I was engaging with the narrative and things like that. And I did that a lot. I engaged with the narrative, and I went to sleep for years listening to um, dramatic reconstructions of Bible stories. And I have memorized not just biblical passages, but like which of the gospels tells which nonsense version based on various sources of like that. So
Mhm.
it wasn't until I came to a point where my knowledge brought me to there's nothing left to stand on. Like you've chipped around the edges and chipped around the edges and chipped around the edges, and suddenly the core element is left, and you look at it and you go, "Oh my God, it's bullshit. It's all the way down." And for me, that moment um, was actually in evidence. Uh, his summary in Why I Am No Longer a Christian. He summarizes the documentary hypothesis. Now, its scholarship has moved far beyond that. This is like Newtonian physics versus relativistic physics. So it's
Hmm.
not that accurate, but the people who like it's still way accurate enough to eliminate the possibility of Moses ever having existed, for example.
Right.
And a key element of that is that two of the voices in the, and by I mean like library voices, you know, were of the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel and Judah, that they were two separate kingdoms. There was never a whole unified kingdom in the era of David. That was mythological. And that Moses never existed. But that the gods of these two nations were different. They were two different gods that were retconned into always the same God, Yahweh in Judah in the south, El Elyon in the north. I mean, granted, he's one of the Canaanite gods, it's pantheon, yada, yada, yada. But the whole of the history was a retcon. And in the Blasphemers Bible study, we're just now getting to the point where some of that retcon would be starting to happen in the narrative timeline to the days of, we're not to Hosea yet, but Hezekiah. This is when the Yahwist cult started to exert more control and sort of backpile the stories into the narrative that they wanted. And there was this story, there's two versions of it, one with Elisha and one with Micah, where Israel and Judah are going to go to war because reasons with someone else. They're allies at this moment. And the king of Judah goes to the king of Israel and he's like, "Hey, you know, what do the gods say? What are we doing?" He's like, "Oh, I have 50 prophets of God here." And if you in your Bibles, in an English translation, where it says the Lord in all caps, that's Yahweh. Where it says God, that's El or El Elyon or some variation thereof. That's an important distinction. And so they have 50 prophets that are all like, oh, glory and victory and ba, 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 ba. And then the king of Judah says, yes, but are there any prophets of the Lord here? And there's no universe in which those, like, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. You just spoke to 50 of them. Unless it's a different God. And when I realized that, because he didn't bring up that story, I just had it in my mind. And I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unsee that the two gods in this story were two different gods. They were not the same God. But they were the language had tried to fold it over and fold it into one. And when that hit me, it knocked the stuffing out of me. I told you, I think that I kind of blue screened. Where it's like, the cycling just for 3 days, because the foundation of my reality, the first, most complex, most important idea that I had ever been taught to trust or to base my identity or sense of self and reality in the world and love and everything in, had vanished. If gravity had turned off, I couldn't have been more confused.
Years ago, a rabbi told me that yeah, Moses didn't exist, Abraham, most of the biblical characters didn't exist. And what's interesting with that is, when I went to a lecture in Philadelphia, I believe it was at Temple University, this archaeologist gave a speech and was saying how, the Red Sea was actually the Sea of Reeds. Yeah, right. That it was a marshy area that came about to your knees. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And it might dry out in the right time of year with the wind going a certain way. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
And then Prince of Egypt, you got a freaking whale. Ooh.
Yeah. But the psychology of it, right? So after his lecture, this lady said, she's like, historically, you may be correct. But why? Why did you have to take my faith away from me? She didn't care about what was true. She was more concerned about her sensibilities, protecting her sensibilities, not what is true.
Yeah. And that is something that I think definitely is part, for me, of my own brain, the way that it works. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I will very rarely make an absolute statement I will make absolute statements about very few things because there's always a limit to something. And the sense of absolute is just, I'm so unwilling to commit to that. But because I care about truth so much, because I'm always trying to be as accurate as possible, leads to me over explaining and rambling. But it's because I genuinely wish to speak truly and accurately as much as I can. And it has taken me years to come to terms with the fact that a lot of people don't function like that at all.
Most don't.
Yeah, apparently it's not normal. And, neurodivergence and getting into, line on that and a bunch of other people going, why is it exactly a problem with autism that we always tell the truth? How is this he's like, you're disabled, so you don't lie. What?
People need more neurodivergence in their life. Yeah. We need more. Absolutely.
Oh, how does this even? I'm like, what kind of psychosis is it to make a system where too much truth is indicative of something being wrong with you, apparently?
Oh, wow.
I do not like this system. Do not like it.
No, me either. Not at all. Not at all. And speaking about neurodivergence, right? how did that influence your experience within the Christian faith, and did it play a role
Oh
in your
God, yeah.
decision to leave because of the
Oh
honesty,
yeah.
right? Because
Oh
of the
yeah.
transparency, right? Like, let's get into that, like, because that's very interesting. Because I always wondered, how does that play a role, and if we did the research, would people that are neurodivergent, would they happen to be more non-religious than people who aren't? That would be
Here's
an interesting study.
I will wager, based on my own experience and what I've observed, that neurodivergent people are going to fit into very strongly religious or very strongly atheist. Your stereotypical angry atheist, probably neurodivergent. And this is the same thing with Aaron. I've had to explain to him several times, Aaron, I love you. I care about truth just as much as you do. But please stop pretending the other people do. Please. They don't. We
Mm,
know they don't. But it's because when we commit to something, we are all in. Like, if you have my trust and you are close with me, I will be there for you in hell without a question or a second thought. And I have been. That's not an idle boast. But if you break the trust at that level, it's, it never comes back. That's a very absolute thing. We think in absolutes, in black and whites. Now, I definitely describe my positions with a lot of nuance because I've had to learn that nuance manually. The nuance is like everything in my brain. It's automatic. It's not automatic. It's like driving a standard all the time. You never get to drive an automatic. Even your
okay.
habits, like brushing your teeth, you have to do everything manually. It's really annoying. Um, but it at the same time, then you end up really paying attention to the details. And I think that you'll have really strong opinions among neurodivergent people because this is the type of thing where there's a claim that has a real effect on our lives. This is not just whatever you feel. I mean, that's always the line on both sides of the aisle that pissed me off the most, was just truth is subjective. It's what's true to you. No. If I was made by a psychotic god out of a man's rib because he wants me to be an accessory and I have to
Mm,
take responsibility for a blood magic human sacrifice from before I was born, or the being who is inherently divine love will not be able to stand the sight of me, that is a claim that has bearing on me. It's not like whether or not you like pineapple on pizza. That doesn't affect me.
right. Doesn't that go back? Doesn't that go back into the whole Adam and Eve thing, right?
Mm.
How women are just a mere, according to the story, women are just a mere creation that have been extracted from men. Meaning, men, this patriarchal hierarchy has this kind of type of notion that, oh, we were created, right? We
Mm.
were created by God. But for women, you just created from our side. Without us, you wouldn't exist. Even though we know biologically that's just incoherent, right? But
Mm.
that's what they think, right? You just came from us, but we were
Which
actually
would
created.
make Eve trans, incidentally, but that's neither here nor there.
No.
I,
Yes.
I am glad she had her gender affirming surgery. Power to Eve. But
Yes.
actually, I have a fun little story for you if you want it, because you asked me about my name. I took the name Lilith as an atheist online and for my work in that world. And I took it for a couple of reasons. When I was a little girl, my father read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to me. And the human children were always referred to as sons of Adam and daughters of Eve. And the evil witch, though, Jadis, was part jinn and part giantess, and she was a daughter of Lilith. So I traced where he got it from George MacDonald, and then I found out the original story of Lilith. Now, the rabbis in the Talmud We'll make up additional backstories for every little inconsistency and every little character that ever appears anywhere in the Bible. It's really fun. And so this is from the, let's say, the non-canonical extra canon works. Do you want to hear the story?
Absolutely.
In the beginning, God made man. Man and woman created he them. Man and woman were created at the same time, Adam and Lilith, created as one and equals, and placed in the Garden of Eden. And in the garden they stayed and tended the plants. But Adam was not content to be equal with his mate. So he said, I should be on top, and tried to force her to take a subservient role during sex and presumably everywhere else. Not because of any particular reason, except that he was a man and thought he had the right. Lilith was having none of this. So she spoke the secret name of God, the magical name which gave her the power to fly, and she flew away from Eden and went to the head of the Euphrates River. There she took many lovers, angels, and bore many children who were condemned as abominations. And Adam ran to God and whined and cried, why did she leave? It's not fair. Make her come back. And so God sent his messengers to Lilith and said, return and submit to your husband. And Lilith said no. And so God did what tyrants do. He slaughtered her children and cursed her. And then he went back to the Garden of Eden, and he took a rib from Adam to make a woman more malleable, a woman willing to be subservient, for she had come from him and would have to acknowledge him as the superior. Then Lilith returned to Eden, and it was she who took the form of the serpent to share knowledge with Eve. And for this reason, in the Sistine Chapel, under the brushes of the great artists of the Renaissance, the serpent is drawn with the face of a woman, for she was not Satan, but Lilith.
I like that. I like that rendition. I like that. It makes perfect sense. Because I always wondered. Of course, mythologically, the serpent didn't lie.
No? No, the serpent told the truth.
Told
every
truth.
word. You will not surely die. For God knows that on the day you eat of it, you will become as God, knowing good and evil. And they did not die for another 900 years, and died for lack of access to the tree of life, which stood beside the tree of knowledge. The serpent didn't say a single lie. God did.
Which is why I always tell some Christians that they're worshiping the wrong God.
Yep. I mean, I understand Satanists. If you're going to revere a myth, revere the myth of the one who stood up to an unjust authority.
Now, I'll drink to that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this is what we're doing now. This is why we're here. And you know, with that being said, so when you were in the church, um, being neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, these are separate questions. So, what challenges did you face in a church while when you were going, and then what challenges? How does that compare to your experience in secular spaces as well? Because there's, you know, no space is perfect, right? So I'm pretty sure
No,
you've had to
no,
do
it's
some
not.
navigation even in these secular atheist spaces, right? Like
Oh God, yeah.
I've heard a lot of women tell me that, Rob, I was a part of this atheist group online and I had to leave. And I'm like, whoa, why? Because of the misogyny,
Yep.
because of the sexism. Just because you're atheist doesn't mean that those types of attributes go away.
They don't.
And I
And
was
they're
like, and
deeply
that was
entrenched in the
years ago.
culture. Yeah. Um, when I said that I don't see certain power hierarchies, sometimes that
Hmm.
works for my benefit. Sometimes I walk blindly through something that would intimidate someone else because I do not see it enough to give a damn. So that can, on occasion, be a type of protection. In church, I'll tell you right now, I was the obnoxious kid. I didn't even need the sword drill. I could quote all the Bible verses. I knew all the answers. Hell, in that Bible school thing, I actually had a professor ask if I'd been looking at his notes because I kept asking the question that was on the next slide. Because I would fit things together quickly and then jump to the next conclusion and the next logical question to be asked. And I didn't have time to wait around for people. So I always thought someone thought I was stupid if they were explaining the details over. And it isolated me. And that is secular and religious. It isolated me. But it also, in religious spaces especially, it encouraged unhealthy habits. There are many types of not just diversity of mind, but genuine sickness of mind that can be not just excused, but absolutely empowered to be its worst, the worst version of itself by Christian belief systems and Christian beliefs, particularly your evangelical types, your charismatics, your fundies. You know, if you get someone who acts crazy but claims to have the gift of prophecy or the gift of knowledge, they may be allowed to do things that they should not be allowed to do, and they may be taken seriously in ways that they should not be. And it doesn't just encourage us to use, the diversity of our view to add a perspective that can provide insight, but rather to either, appeal to ego and be seen as authorities. And that always creeped me out. Because while sometimes I see things very clearly and I'm like, no, if we do this, this is going to happen. Like, it's just, it is. I don't think that should give me carte blanche. I don't think that's good for anyone else. I don't think it's good for me. Ultimately it's very all and nothing. You hear about all or nothing. It's all and nothing. It's the maximum of solipsism with the maximum of self-degradation, as Hitch so kindly
Yes.
reminded us. As for leaving, it meant that I couldn't lie. When I realized it, it meant that I couldn't stomach singing the hymns, which was my job.
Okay.
I had a church job singing in the choir. They'd get people with some professional training to lead sections in the choir. So you could still
Hmm.
mostly have parishioners, but this particular church was actually thought it was very important to have believing people. And they loved me because I was very sincere in my belief. And then when I wasn't, damn, I couldn't stay. And I lost my job because of that. And then, that job, I obviously had several at the time. And I couldn't go halfway. And that made it harder because it isolated me from people, granted, who really I could have used their support, because at the time I was also dealing with a very, very troubled and disturbed husband that I was going to have to engineer an escape from. And that's a whole different story. I wish it was as simple as speaking the name of God and flying away. I would have done that in a heartbeat. But then I couldn't have
Wow.
taken my cat, and I'm not doing that. So yeah. If on the pardon me, if on the Bible study I ever speak in the character of Lilith and speak about my time married to Adam, I'm speaking about a real person. His name was not Adam, but he's real.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he
Yeah, I'm
called me a
sorry that you
demon
had
as
to go.
well.
Oh yeah, somebody called me a demon on Instagram about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, you know, um, but they didn't really know, the etymology behind it, and they didn't know that demons weren't always viewed as negative either. You know, the whole Damien with the Greeks. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Didn't the Persians take it from the Devas, which was the highest point in the cycle of reincarnation in the Buddhist cycle from Hinduism? Yeah, which were like the divine beings of joy and perfect,
yeah,
Yeah, it's
oh, absolutely. And what about your what challenges, like even currently, do you see or have for yourself in secular spaces?
I know
Because
it's
it's
hard.
predominantly
White men,
absorbed by men.
yeah,
Yes.
white men. It's racism and sexism are two sides of the same coin here, and I try not to speak to racism more than is appropriate, because obviously I'm on the privileged side of that coin, but I can at the very least use my experiences with sexism to somewhat understand the kind of dynamic going on there and extrapolate a few things. Um, I think people are not always aware, and especially people like myself who are neurodivergent, who never consciously or even unconsciously bought into a lot of these power hierarchies. It's genuinely hard for us to be aware of them. So that can be something we really need to work on. But at the same time, yeah, absolutely. I do not pull my punches, in case you haven't noticed. And many men find that intimidating. And I find them finding that intimidating to be a source of security and safety, because I have always been able to intimidate men, even when I wasn't trying to. So sometimes I let that protect me, because why wouldn't I? The type of men who are going to be intimidated are probably not the safest to be around anyway. It's something where it's it's also hard, and maybe you've found this in your experiences, where it's so entrenched in the culture that you don't even realize you're compensating for it all the time. Men are shocked when, women say, they say, "Oh, why didn't you do something to protect yourself?" And we're like, give them a list of 75 things we do every single day to ensure our physical safety if we leave the house. Um, and they're like, "Well, you don't all do that." Yes, yes, we all do that from 12 on or earlier. Like, yes, we do. And the compensation it's frustrating, because I have to become conscious of it and then work against it. But then my instinct is just to confront it head on. And that's not always the most effective strategy, even though obviously it very much is what I want to do. I absolutely love to just run in and bash it on the head. But with entrenched systems of thought, and it's still to this day, all the time, they'll either assume I'm a man and not look at my name, or um
Oh,
they'll call me fat and say that I can't get a man, or criticize my makeup, which granted I don't wear much very often, so I probably deserve that. Not that I care. Or they'll, I joked with you last week about how when I went to school as a kid, I would be called a dumb blonde because I was a natural blonde as a child, by boys who couldn't understand me when I spoke because I was speaking at a first year university language level. And they were just not, they had no idea what I was doing, but I was blonde, so I must be dumb. And so it's, it's part of the reason I dyed my hair. I just didn't want to deal with it. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's one of those things that it's hard, it's complicated, it's something we constantly wrestle with. How to be conscious of it, how to make others conscious of it, how to figure out if the person you want to make conscious of it is someone with good intentions who simply doesn't see this thing, and you can't blame them because at one point you didn't see it, so you're going to help them out, or if they're genuinely acting in bad faith and they don't give a damn and just want to boost their ego. That is a huge part of debates online, and I've gotten it right and wrong a couple times. I've been able to talk down young guys who meant well, bless their hearts, but really were missing some key points of information. And I've had people lash out at me, and I've heard in that, maybe they were genuinely trying to be authentic, but, they used the same line as 300 dishonest twats before them, so I did not assume that.
Oh man, you said something key about men being intimidated by women, and as a man, and as a man that was reared by three women: my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt, and my grandfather. But my grandfather was different. He was one of those Renaissance men from Harlem, right, into the poetry. So
Ooh.
he was like woke back then, right? Like the whole,
Mm-hmm.
so he was a little different.
But you got the
Um,
language skills, though.
yes, yes, and I'm grateful for that, because had I lived with my father,
Mm.
I'm not sure if I would be the man that I am today.
Yeah.
Because my father was from Alabama,
Mm.
very conservative, very right. You already know. So
Mm-hmm.
just by luck, I was able to be reared by three women. And what I found out is that over my tenure on this earth is that most men, I truly believe, genuinely don't like women. Now that's not to get it confused with homosexuality or anything like that, but I just think most men just genuinely don't like women. They like women for very narrow aspects, right? Like, I think this is every man's dream, most men's dream.
Mm.
Feed me, fuck me, shut up unless I talk to you. Most men, if they could have those three things, they'd be in heaven. That would be heaven for most men, right? But that's how you
Oh,
treat
yeah.
property. You see what I'm saying? That's how you
I
treat property.
do. I do. And that's both patriarchy and white supremacy fundamentally work not just on establishing a social hierarchy that's like a structure we can all build our lives on, and maybe it's a bit unequal, but we'll all get by. It thrives on this sense of the dehumanization of this
Mm,
idea that the white Christian male is the ideal, perfect icon, the correct fundamental man person. That is a person. And by every degree you are closer to that, you attain or retain some aspect of personhood. And by every degree you differ, you lose personhood. And that's the part that I have never been able to think like that. I never in my life, every I could feel the stain of it in so many things. I look back now and I can give words to it, but just elements of condescension and narratives that I couldn't. They just creep me out. And they rub me the wrong way. And I'm fortunate in a way too, because while my parents were Christians and when I was young, they were quite evangelical. My mother's family is very, very, let's say this, they live in Alberta, and Alberta is the Texas of Canada for a reason. So, yeah. My aunt
Won't be visiting Alberta.
No, I mean you'll live in the cities, but yeah, you'd be at worse danger for face palming. The racism is worse towards Indigenous people. Yay. In Canada, we are aware of our faults and we try to address them. At least partly.
But Canada's looking pretty good though. Based on this current administration, I don't know anything about Canada, but it's looking pretty good.
I respect that. Well, and this is for so many years we've gotten by saying we're better than the United States in a lot of ways. We're less racist. We've got healthcare better covered. We got a lot of things that are better than the United States. We actually have gun control regulation, because we don't need to have sex with our guns. And it's not that we don't have any guns. Liberal friends who moved out to the bushes, and it's like, oh, there's a grizzly in the neighborhood. Looks like we're going to have to get a gun license. Okay, then. Don't be messing with grizzlies. If it's got a hump, just get out of there. But it's but at the same time, earlier today I was watching this reruns of this old show, Canada's Worst Driver. It's something that there's been in various states and various parts of the world, blank worst driver. But our show ran for 15 years. It was brilliant. You get the worst drivers and you put them through these challenges and try and teach them. And some could be taught and some could not. But there was a thing they would always say, look where you want to go, where you're driving. Don't look at the obstacle, see the obstacle, but then look to the open space. Look where you want to go. And you'll go there and not hit the moose. Which you really don't want to do because you will die. If you are in a car and there is a moose, the moose will have a slight bruise and you will end up on a t-shirt. That's what happens.
That's the same thing even here with deer. I can't tell you how many times people have been unalive because, a deer crosses the road, goes to the windshield. So of course the deer is trying to get out and its hooves are beating the driver to death because it's trying to get out of the shard glass.
Yeah. But the problem is a moose is a deer the size of an elephant.
I know that's a whole different scale.
I mean, not as thick, but they're running 60K in snow up to here. Yeah, the size of an elephant. Yeah, they can hold their breath and dive deep enough that orcas, killer whales, have been known to occasionally hunt them. It's a crime of opportunity, but
wow, a crime of opportunity.
Well, they're not gonna live off the moose,
Oh man, I like that. Oh wow. Growth said, as a Southern woman, I appreciate Liveth's use of "bless their hearts."
Thank you. I have learned enough Southern to to know that one. And I love Seth Andrews. He and Aaron are friends, and actually I had the best time. I was at the We Can Reason conference in Western Canada, Reason Conference in Alberta, actually. And both of them were there. And we ended up, it was myself, Jeff, and Aaron and Seth on the trivia team for Bible trivia. And we won. And I had a couple of those answers. But admittedly, I did have an unfair advantage with that setup. But yeah, we won funny little pens and bragging rights. It was a good time.
Oh yeah, I love Seth's voice. His voice.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
A man with a trained speaking voice.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. As a man, I have to say that. I love his voice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That took you to another place. I'm like, yeah. Okay. Shoot, nobody.
This is not OnlyFans. Oh
Your
God,
face
no,
is
but
turning red like your hair.
oh, I blame it on the flag
Oh, you blame it on the flag? Okay, we'll blame it on the flag.
and the wine, obviously. We've got a theme going on.
So here's the thing: making the transition from Christianity to atheism. How has that shaped your understanding of morality and purpose, especially as someone who was once grounded in those concepts of Christianity? How? Because I asked that because, one of the most prolific writers of our time, Ta-Nehisi Coates, an unabashed atheist, by the way, in his book Between the World and Me, he speaks about basically how atheism might be the key to setting Black people free, because if there's no salvation, then what is there, right? Like if when we see a tsunami that has killed 30,000 people and all these natural disasters, we don't look at Mother Nature and say, oh, Mother Nature's so evil. No, Mother Nature is just Mother Nature. And Mother Nature's like, oh, you just happen to be in the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Right. And so if there's
aiming for you.
Right. So if there's no salvation, if everything is just what it is, then atheism is the only really route to really go and just take life as it is, love the ones you love, take care of the people that you love, and just move forward. What do you think? What do you think about that? Right, when you look at the universe, obviously there's no salvation. Obviously, because if the planet Earth blew up tomorrow, no one in the universe would be like, "Oh, damn, that's a shame." We don't even know we're here.
In the sky,
just one less star. That would be.
A billion years from now, maybe someone would see the light and go, "Oh, that's interesting," and mark it on the chart, and that'd be it. That'd be all of our legacy.
And not the 8 billion people that perish. Like, oh, look at that little speck of dust. Oh, okay, let's put it in science books for now.
Yep.
That's it.
I have to say, it's interesting too, because as part of trying to understand Christianity better, which eventually led me out, I did read some apologetics that didn't. It was easier to read apologetics that insulted my mind than ones that insulted my integrity. Hitch used to mock C.S. Lewis relentlessly. And while I can see where he's coming from, I don't think he's entirely fair. Some of his criticisms are based more on the misuse of C.S. Lewis arguments than on their use. But that's a whole different discussion. But I couldn't listen to William Lane Craig or someone like that, who's just honestly a or Francis, Frank, what's his name? Just a hack selling. It was awful. I couldn't. It hurts my soul. But nonetheless, a lot of their ideas, for lack of a better term, did trickle down to a lot of pastors and youth ministers that I obviously heard and listened to, interacted with. And I was taught to fear the idea of the loss of purpose and the loss of God and the loss of morality, that God was not the excuse for morality in a straight punishment reward system, but more like the rational ground of all being source of morality.
Mm-hmm.
That, and the idea of death without an afterlife, all these things, I was taught to fear them. And I was taught that without them, everything would be hopeless. And so, there's a lot of psychological elements to how they hook that into your entire sense of self and personal safety, like on the very deepest level of your sense of identity. So if I was asked before I was capable of even imagining that there was no God, I would not have been able to imagine that that would have been anything but despair. And what I found when I actually made that realization was peace. Peace Christianity had promised me all my life, but never delivered. Running from the things we fear only makes the shadow bigger, and we run farther, and we live in fear. The coward dies many times before his death, the valiant taste of death but once. You live in ever almost dying, not literal death, but death of self and identity and just the state of fear. And when I turned and looked death as an actual end right in the face, all the fear dissolved. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't necessarily gunning for it, but everything suddenly fit into place. And everything I'd been taught to fear suddenly wasn't actually frightening. And the peace that passes understanding finally came with the death of faith.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. It reminds me of what Epicurus once said, right? If I am, then death is not. And if death is, then I am not. So why fear something which only exists when I do not?
Yeah.
Because life and death cannot exist in the same space simultaneously.
And when my dad was dying, and he still believed in God and in an afterlife, but he no longer believed in hell, and he felt bad about teaching me about hell. I was able to reassure him that I did not fear hell. And that's a different thing from whether or not you believe in it, because you cannot believe in it but still have that fear deep inside. And I told him truly that I did not fear it. And I told him that what I had come to the point of was a determination to live a life I would be content with if there was no afterlife. Not saying that there definitely isn't, and I know that or anything, but that at the end, I would say, I am content to have lived this life. I am content to have done what I have done, to have made the choices I have made in as much as I can be, and to walk into that without fear and without regret. Not because I've never done anything in my life to regret, but because I've looked my choices in the eye and done the best I can with them. And the old thought of Marcus Aurelius, who said, live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, they will judge you justly. If there are gods and they are not just, you should not worship them or seek their good opinion. And if there are no gods, then you will be gone and will have left a legacy of doing what is right. I mean, that's the antidote to Pascal's wager in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Milwaukee Atheist is on. Hi.
Oh, hi, Lance.
I just saw the comment. Just
what do you say?
Come in. He says, "Hello, is this thing on?" It's on. We received your message.
Sorry,
Bro
love.
said, "I am content to have lived this life." I love that. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the old Egyptian proverb that says, "Drink and be merry, for tomorrow we all shall die."
It's true.
Literally, we're drinking and
Hey,
being merry.
absolutely. But and I mean, I am that insufferable asshole who has to get deep on everything. In my cups or not. So there is that sense of like deeper, you know, be content, be there for your family that you love because that's the person you want to be. Tell the truth because that's the person you want to be. And especially in these times, in this day, with all the things that are going on in this world, we look back at history, and I used to love those stories. Granted, the stories I read were very sanitized, but, stories of the Underground Railroad or stories of Jews escaping from SS officers and, all of that. Like, be who you would want to have been in those stories. This is your life. This is your story. Write it. Face it with courage. And yeah, at times it is going to kick the shit out of you. And you
Yes.
may need to take a break and lay down. And I have. But then you grow and you rise like a phoenix because that is what living things do. They are ever changing. They are taking what is dead and making it into something new. And as long as we live, that is what we do.
Absolutely. You know, yeah, the fear of death. Opening up the Bible for some every day is like the book of life. It's like the book of
Mm.
life opens up for me each and every time I wake up in the morning. I write my own book, the living book, right? Not the archaic, outdated literature. And it's so many people expire in this life daily with masks on. Like the graves are filled with masks because people are afraid to live one unapologetic moment in their life. We're consistently living our lives to appease other people through their lenses of sensibilities. And it's a shame that people will just leave this life never experiencing what it means to live unapologetically. That
Hands the rods
saddens
of
me.
empire. Yeah, I get it. Um, it makes me think of elegy written in a country churchyard, hands the rods of empires might have swayed, some Cromwell guiltless of his nation's blood. I think the most famous quote is, "Full many a gem of purest ray serene the dark unfathomed caves of oceans bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air." And yet, I don't
Mm,
think that bloom is wasted because it did bloom. I don't think we need to be all important to be important. I think you can be important to the people who you have touched, who you have affected. I think that is more valuable than any number of imagined eternal plaudits. And like you always say, to be human is enough.
drink to that. It always has been. Right? And plus, who wants to live forever? Who in the world wants to live forever? I don't.
Forever, ever? Yeah, no.
Ever, ever?
No,
Andre 3000, ever? Right?
ever, ever.
I mean, and,
No.
and not only live forever, and not only according to Chris, not only live forever, but live forever, worship it. Oh, that's a prison sentence.
That's hell. That's hell.
Now that is
That
hell.
is fucking hell. I made a joke when we were talking on the Bible study. I was admittedly, I was a little tired because daylight savings time is stupid and we need to stop it. And I was talking about how we needed to find a way to speed run through some of the Psalms because it's just, sucking God's dick in A minor, sucking God's dick in E major, sucking God's ears. I didn't even mean to make the Kendrick reference initially, but I was like, yeah, no, it fits. But but though, it's a danger response. You got blurry. Just so you know. Your camera looks in a little blurry, but autofocus. Okay. Yeah, there you go. But it is a fear response. You see, if you're attacked, there's fight or flight. Some people also recognize freeze, which is genuinely something. But people forget fawn is also a response to threat. And that's what worship is. I was taught from knee-high to a grasshopper, if you want to use that phrase, that the proper response to the existence of God is worship, that it was what is owed to God. And that was, drummed into me well before the age of reason. And I look at it now and it's so perverse. Yeah, Milwaukee atheists, at least you can escape North Korea. At least you can die and leave and not have to freaking worship the great leader and the dear leader every single minute of it's awful. It's terrible.
Hitch even spoke about that, right? Like, even to death, you can't even escape God, the great micromanager. Even in death, you still can't escape. You're still micromanaged in death. That's a perpetual prison sentence.
It is. And it's also it's very degrading, but it's also incredibly egotistical. And one of the things my mother taught me, a very smart thing that she taught me, was when it comes to conspiracy theories, the ones that are bullshit are all about appealing to your ego. It's not like there's no conspiracies in the world, I don't think Doge counts as much of a conspiracy. It's kind of all out in the open, but, if you wanted to put it that way. But at the same time, the ones are, only I see the truth. Only I am clever enough to, it's all about the ego. It's the same thing with Christianity and the degradation of self-abasement and to see yourself as a small, dirty thing or not to think about yourself at all, which is better. Literally a quote from C.S. Lewis, who I used to love, and I have a complicated emotional relationship now. But you look at that and you think, I look as an adult, and I don't consider that I fully could be an adult until I became an atheist. I look at that and I think, what a ridiculous idea that the God who apparently spoke the universe into existence, put 1,000 shining spheres with a single wave, spun galaxies and oceans and all the life in the depth. And he wrote a book, had a kid, and thinks it's icky if boys kiss. What kind of priorities? That it does not compute. A being of that magnitude would not give a flying fuck if two boys are kissing. No.
That's why it was necessary for man to create God.
In the image of God. No, in the image of man, man created God. In the image of man created he him. Racist, sexist, bigoted, and vengeful created he them.
It's like the famous quote, it eludes me who said it. Said, the more I studied religion, the more I'm convinced that man has worshipped nothing other than himself.
Thank you.
That's all it is male worship. It's just male worship. That's all it is.
It is. Well, it's not just male worship. You would like the work of Francesca Stavropoulos. Lawrence, Milwaukee atheist, he really loves her, and I love uh, the work of hers that I've read. Far less than him. He's actually getting a degree in these things. I've had life things. But genuinely, God and Anatomy, you should read it because it traces the history and other books like The Evolution of God or the Karen Armstrong um, The History of God talk about the specific Abrahamic God and how that came about, and what I've talked about with the multiple gods that fed into the final version and retcons and, hyping it up and building up. But the idea of just divine in and of itself, and how, particularly in that part of the world, it became explicitly male. Because in all religions, at some point, there was a masculine and a feminine element,
Mm-hmm.
and there's balance in that. And the male could be male and the female could be female, and each were powerful in different ways, but in equal might. And there would be battles between them, and one would win one and one would win another. And maybe they would come together in some way to create something truly spectacular. But the specific deliberate degradation of the feminine divine and how it transferred, interestingly enough, the invention of boots, how it changed our relationship to the earth, and then how it separated us from nature in a sensory way. And then also the masculine and the phalluses everywhere, freaking dicks. George Carlin was more right than most of his listeners knew when he said, it's all about my dick. God has a bigger dick than your God.
Oh yeah.
Genuinely. And how it became this hyper masculinity in this artificial, weird way. And this became folded into and became part of the DNA of specifically the monotheistic God. Of all gods by now, but specifically the monotheistic God of Abraham, so fundamentally. And I don't think they can be divorced. It's way back in the DNA. Like we're going back to Pikaia grasslands and the, evolution of the notochord. It's all the way in there in the DNA of that God concept. And I don't think we can just unpick it.
We can't. That's why in a recent video I had explained that even a lot of people try to make the differentiation between theology and toxic theology.
Ugh.
As if like, oh, there's cyanide, but then there's toxic cyanide. They're both poison. You can't make the distinction between the two.
It's
Because like you're saying, it's inherently built on fallacious methods and
on toxic ideas.
Yes, which is why I think indoctrinating children is child abuse, because going back to Abraham, right? You had, Søren Kierkegaard, his teleological suspension of the ethical, right? He tried to wrap his mind around, well, why would God tell Abraham to potentially sacrifice his son Isaac on an altar, right? So Kierkegaard, basically his Lutheran background, his Lutheran piety, he was like, well, I got it. So God temporarily suspended ethics so that Abraham could then show his loyalty. Excuse me? And so nobody talks about Isaac as far as the psychological trauma he has because his father tried to slit his throat. So we don't talk about Isaac.
No.
What people talk about is, and I've literally heard this, Lilith, people say, I want a faith as strong as Abraham. What?
I was a child when I first heard that. So many ex-evangelicals, and we call ourselves ex-evangelicals, so many of them have horror stories about the times they asked their father, would you sacrifice me the way Abraham did Isaac? And I never had the courage to ask.
Well, you know what? I did with my mom. And you know what she told me? as a staunch Christian that she is, even to this day, but her views have lightened up. She then told me I would potentially have to go to hell because if God told me to sacrifice you, I would try to kill God. As a Christian, my mother said
Oh my God. I have never met your mother. I don't know
that.
your mother, but I love her and I respect her from the depths of my soul. Because I got to tell you, looking back without the obligation to believe certain things, and make no mistake, if you have never been there, they take you as a child long before the age of reason and they tell you and teach you in ways that trigger deep, deep parts of your psychology that you are obligated to defend certain beliefs at the risk of far worse than death and the dissolution of the self. So you feel an instinctive urge to defend those ideas. But she would not do that. And I respect that so much. Looking back at that now, I'm like, that God, if he exists, he's the final boss. I'm going to take his kneecap off and use it as shield. You know, someone get me the elite weapons in here. We're going for it.
Yes.
I
Yes.
am not. I will have no truck with that monster. Uh, if I say anything to pacify him, it's going to be close enough so I can get close enough to hit him in the nads.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oh, so we are an hour and 21 minutes. We could talk forever. But I have to ask you though. We could that's why we got to do many more of these and we talked about that.
I am at your
What
disposal.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Because you are neurodivergent. People that will watch this, people that are, you know, watching YouTube and TikTok and, getting their feet wet into the deconstruction space. Um, what would your advice be for those who are neurodivergent that are struggling with religion? What would be your advice for them to finally accept the journey of deconstruction? And I'm biased here, and hopefully the conclusion would be deconversion as well.
I agree.
What would be your advice
Oh, my
for
first
people?
line is actually going to be for the neurotypicals.
Okay.
If there is someone in your life who speaks out of pocket, who does not respect the authorities that you seem to respect, they may see the world a different way. And this can lead to many a misunderstanding and misunderstandings on important things. Always ask at least one clarifying question so you know who you're truly dealing with. If you're actually dealing with a bad faith actor, they will reveal themselves in the answer to that question. If you're dealing with someone who's neurodivergent, then they will give greater context. We are always glad to. And that will tell you where you really are. Please ask one question. For the people who are like I was and who are struggling with this idea that something that you invested wholeheartedly in, mind, body, soul, and spirit, just as you were taught, and it's not working, and you don't know why, and you keep thinking it's you, but at some point that conclusion doesn't make sense anymore. Have courage. The truth is not afraid to be questioned. You can poke as many holes as you want, and the truth is what will be there in the end. There's nothing to fear, and the people who want to make you afraid are the ones you should distrust.
Hmm. Hmm. The ones that make you afraid are the ones that you should distrust. You mentioned before, you made the juxtaposition between neurodivergent and then bad faith
Mm.
actors. Explain what you meant by when you said bad faith actors.
It's something I've observed in myself. I've observed in my father, who the man was never diagnosed, but I swear to God, he had the biggest case of ADHD in his entire life. He was
I
also,
do.
I believe it. I believe it. But he was a good man, and he had that blindness that good men have when they think that someone can't actually be as bad as they think. And with something like racism, for example, he would end up making excuses for bad behavior, including sexism too, including men. And he had daughters. He had all daughters. He was a girl dad. He was the best girl dad. Teach you how to change a tire. There for you, 120%. But he was always trying to figure out, as I was, how other people think. And if you're trained to be decent and you are yourself a decent person, and to assume the worst of people is a stain on your own character, you will try to find a way that something is not as bad as it seems. And that's where you can fall victim to the pseudo logic in something like a dog whistle. You know how with a dog whistle, there's the underlying element that in context is really a nasty hit on someone. But if some other person, and we live in a big world now, the internet, all kinds of different cultures, different life experiences all over the world, someone outside of that context doesn't know what the context of the dog whistle is. Like I made the comparison on a TikTok about calling a Black person well-spoken. And yeah, see,
I've had that said to me a
and
plethora
you are a well-spoken
of
man.
times.
But when I say that, I'm not grading you on a curve. I'm not saying you're well-spoken for one of those folks.
Right,
I'm
right,
saying
right.
you're well-spoken for a person who speaks English. Like, those are not the same thing.
Absolutely.
But because I am not from the United States in the South, for many years, I was entirely unaware of that context. And so I can absolutely see a scenario where I would have defended a racist person and say, hey, she gave you a compliment. Why would you be so upset? Not because I want to uphold that appalling dehumanizing narrative that is absolutely the underpinning of that, but because innocently, I don't think like that. And I would not assume such vile intention of someone else without reason. And that's where I have to learn, and that's where I have to be conscious and be willing to assume bad of people in some cases. But that's where I say ask one clarifying question, because in my discoveries about racism and trying to unpack the parts that, I'm just blind to because, Casper, the friendly ghost here. And the people of color, Black people especially, who have been most helpful and kind and useful and educational to me, have been those who asked just one clarifying question. And I know that that's useful too, because I've had people dealing in bad faith and certain different contexts, and I've asked one clarifying question, and then they double down on the bad part, and you're like, okay, yeah, I know exactly who you are. Now I can nail you down. But I know that someone like myself, who was merely, dealing without
Hmm.
answered that very
Your
differently.
okay. Your audio was like mumbled for a second, but I think it cleared up.
Okay. But yeah, and
There you go.
that's actually something I learned in law enforcement. I had some training with law enforcement as part of a very interesting summer job. Another story. But a lie is only 3 questions deep. If someone says something that you think has a certain connotation, ask 1, maybe 2 questions just for clarification. if they are genuinely acting in bad faith, they will only leave themselves more exposed if you do that. And you won't even have to work for the win. And if it's a genuine misunderstanding, that will be revealed too. And then you'll know what they're missing. Either way, you win.
Either way, it's a win-win.
Oh,
I
knowledge is
dig that.
power. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. I like that. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Lilith, we're going to have to do this again because we have so much surface to cover, you know.
And I have to pick your brain. You made this one all about me.
Oh yeah, because you're my guest. So yeah, the CIA light is shining on you. But yeah, no, next time, yeah, ask questions away, ask away. And I hope, you know, the people that have viewed this, you know, have and it's cool. The first time it was like up to almost like 100 at one point. So like that's pretty good for the first time. And yeah. So I hope people will take heed to what you said and more so instill courage, because this whole thing is really about courage. And I'm glad that the Milwaukee Atheist is on too, because, you know, Lilith, I put a lot of, especially here, what's transpiring here in America, I put a lot of this at our feet, my feet, atheist feet, because I hear a lot of, well, I don't believe in this mess, and my children don't believe in this mess, so we're good. No, you're not good, because the people that believe in it are also the people that's making policy. See, that's where the separation of American exceptionalism, even though you can be an atheist, you could still fall under the banner of American exceptionalism, which then leads to individualism. As long as I and my family don't believe in this, we're good. No, that's not good enough. And it's the whole thing about atheists. Like, yes, I'm a secular humanist too, but you know what? A lot of that I had to kind of deal with myself, Lilith. A lot of that I had to confront myself and say, you're being too kind, Rob, because you know the word secular and humanist are more soft terms, and you know you'll get a little bit more nods and agreeability if you use humanism, and that's our fault, right? No, I'm an atheist and I'm a secular humanist too, but how can we normalize this unless we have the courage to say, no, I'm non-religious. I really don't adhere to organized religion. I consider myself more spiritual. You know how many of my friends say that? And I know personally, you are straight up atheist, but you don't want to say it because you don't want to offend your family. You don't want to offend your colleagues. You don't want to offend your friends. And you're creating more harm than good. Say what you are. Like Carl Sagan said, it makes for social lubrication. It covers over differences, but it is not a guide to truth. No. It is not a guide to truth.
Valuing truth. I was so programmed that I could not consider the non-existence of a God for many years, despite the evidence and despite my own intelligence, which is substantial enough that it should have been able to accept that. I couldn't. My brain was so programmed. And there was a moment that came up on a YouTube video with a Richard Dawkins debate with a Jewish rabbi who somewhat more moderate, and he was talking about the social utility of religion, and Richard Dawkins he fucking had it. And he said, what does any of this have to do with whether or not religion is true? I care if it's true. And in that moment, I said, if I'm the one on the side of truth, why is my opponent the one who gives a damn about what is true?
Wow.
And this might be a place where my neurodivergence could be of use, because in those moments where I don't see the hierarchies that other people see and respect, and I don't, I can speak. It does not require the same degree of courage for me to say, God is a bitch and I will take him out. And he's not real. And I do not give a damn what he thinks of me or what you think he thinks of me. I can say that. I have no internal fear. I respect that people live in reality, in physical circumstances, where they may choose to use the language that is going to keep them alive. And that is, I respect that. There's a time and a place for everything, including subtlety. But if I can be of any use, if my nature and my quirkiness can do anything, I can say what other people are afraid to, because I can't say anything else. It's my nature.
Truth by default.
Uh-huh. Do you know how hard it is for me to lie? It is so hard. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
That social utility thing reminded me of the when someone is pragmatic, right? There's a thing, the pragmatic theory of truth, right? Basically, it doesn't have to be true, but is it useful? Is it useful? And that's kind of like what a lot of believers do, right? Is it useful? Doesn't matter if it's true or not, but is it useful? Right? You know, it doesn't matter. Like if I'm a hitman and I got 100 bodies on my jacket, but let's say I put my children through school and I take care of my family.
Yeah.
Man, he's a hitman, but it's useful because he's taking care of his family. See that? See, that's that whole moral quagmire, right? Like
exactly. But I think Aaron had it right. I think Aaron had it right when he said that lies are like violence. They are a form of violence. To lie to another person is to use violence against them. Now, there is a time for violence. We all recognize this. We may tell our children violence is never the answer, but we know damn good and well that if someone tries to bust through our door and we got a gun, we gonna defend our babies. That's how it's gonna be. And nobody will blame you, because that is the time for violence. It is an extreme time and it is a brief time. And this too, I have learned with lies, particularly, and that's another conversation for another time, but in the leaving of an abusive relationship, where the person is real, unlike God, and actually watching your behavior, you end up dividing your mind into two parts. One part that is aware that you need to get the fuck out of Dodge right the fuck now or sooner. And the other part that is holding the party line. It is a terrible place to be, but maintaining that duality can get you out alive, but it is not sustainable long term. Neither is war, neither is deceit. As a short-term bridge to keep you safe in a desperate situation, yes, that may be the choice you make, and I will not judge you for it.
Absolutely.
But to maintain it, and Dr. Chrissy Stroop, she's made a point of calling out the people who called it, said that Trump and the Trumpublicans, they're not real Christians, because in their mind, Christian means good. And that is not what it means. That is not what it means. Even C.S. Lewis has my back on this. That is not what it means. It means certain ideas. And some of those ideas are incredibly fucked up. And those diabolical, cruel, inhuman doctrines, I could bring scripture to bear for every single one of them. I could give you Christian thinkers dating back to St. Augustine, or even potentially earlier. It is Christianity. Those ugly, terrible things are Christianity just as much as love thy neighbor and blessed are the peacemakers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one thing.
Bishop Augustine, the one that couldn't stand women and the originator of original sin.
Ugh.
Yeah.
God, I hate his version of original sin. He had a mistress who he was like common law married. They had a son, but he was being pushed into a political marriage for, status before he ran off to become a priest. And this woman swore off all other men, and he was, well, give me chastity and give me constancy, but do not give it yet.
Not yet. Hold off on that for a minute.
We'll get around to it.
But not now.
No. Later. You'll all be good.
Wow. Well, Lilith, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. I hope everybody was inspired today, and we have to definitely do this again. And thank you for trusting me as well, to be vulnerable, right? Because it's one thing to, follow people online, and yeah, you can get a sense of, okay, I think I know where their head is at, but people can still act a fool when you get on camera, and sometimes it's kind of the cloak and dagger kind of thing. You know what I mean? So thank you for trusting me. And I greatly appreciate that.
I've always admired your mind and your authenticity. And I appreciate, and I need more friends like you in my life who, can meet me on that level and engage in that dialogue. And that is, I think, the greatest joy in life. And the hope even of an afterlife for some is that maybe somewhere, somehow, we could continue that dialogue.
Absolutely. It just won't be with Jesus. But absolutely.
No.
They won't do
Boy can bring the wine. Boy
That's what he could
bring the wine.
Yes. To be useful. Yes.
Just pour the water through the hole.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you again. Tell everyone too where they can find you, find your work.
Oh,
your
yes, absolutely. Media. Lilith Liberated. I do have a YouTube channel. I have not been active on it for a while. I apologize. Mea culpa. Every Saturday, usually, I am on the Blasphemous Bible Study, R and Rob. We're there with Tomer. We're there with Lawrence. We're there with Isaac. We're there with Mark when he's available, and Aaron, obviously, and his adorable snakes. I'm on Blue Sky. I have left the abomination formerly known as Twitter under Lilith Liberated for reasons I have given in this podcast. That's my name. But it's been a little while since I wrote for Secular World and Atheist Alliance, but I have some other projects in the works. So hopefully those all come together. And in the meantime, I am happy to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you and everyone. Again, you can find me, Robert Affinis, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. I just started Blue Sky maybe 2-3 weeks ago, so I'm starting to be more active on there. And also Threads as well. So website, robertaffinis.com. So take a look and yeah, that's where you can find me. Great talking to you, Lilith. Have a new friend, new Canadian friend. So you can tell me where to go and where not to go when I apply for political asylum. So yeah, so
lawyer friends. I'll see if I can hook you up with someone on the inside track.
Yeah. You know, absolutely.
We took a lot of Syrian refugees during the last Trump apocalypse. So yeah, that's a whole nother. We have got so many topics.
Wow. Okay. And we're gonna try to cover them all. So yeah, we definitely gotta do this again. But thank you again, and thank you everybody for listening. And so thank you, Milwaukee Atheists, Growth, Shan, Eric, and many others. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. And we'll do this again, everyone.
I'm excited.
Okay. Oh, and stay with me for a couple minutes. I'm going to end the